Ron, thanks again for joining InvestorStream. I just had a couple of talking points that came out of your recent investor presentation on the Project Venus coal seam gas play, which was awarded to you in Real Energy late last month in the Surat Basin. Given the Venus project acreage was relinquished by the previous operator, I guess that infers that they didn't see much prospectivity. So what attracted you to bid on this acreage?
That's a very good question, Alex. Firstly, the Project Venus acreage, it's 154 square kilometers. It's the last large area with real Walloon CSG prospectivity, not under production lease or production lease application available on the CSG fairway. Secondly, there are gas pipelines connected to the current high-price East Coast gas market passing through or adjacent to the acreage. Given the location of this project, immediately adjacent to gas pipelines and other infrastructure, plus the fact that domestic gas prices remain relatively high, the threshold for commercial gas flows is substantially less than more remote areas. Therefore, the commerciality threshold is quite low in this acreage. Last point, the well data within and around the permit indicated there are gassy coals throughout the 154 square kilometer tenement.
So you show the top Walloon coal depth, the total coal thickness and gas saturations within and around the tenement. In your considerable experience in the Surat Walloon CSG play, what does that exactly mean?
The main technical requirements for a successful Walloon CSG development are reasonable depths, sufficient coal thickness, high gas saturations, and coal permeability. The previous operator drilled a fully cored CSG well, 3 CSG wells, all in the northern half of the tenement. This data and surrounding core and CSG wells has allowed us to map with some confidence coal depths, thickness, gas saturations, and to some extent coal permeabilities. Now the mapping shows that the total coal seam thickness in the northern half of the tenement is well above the average of the Walloon CSG fairway. Importantly, the gas saturations in the core hole drilled in the tenements are very high, averaging about 100%, and in some coal seams well over 100%. The relevance of this is that high gas saturated coals will require far less dewatering than lower gas saturated coals. 100% gas saturations mean that the dewatering required should be very little to start gas flows. The previous operator interpreted low permeabilities in the testing they carried out, and I believe this is why they relinquished the area, as low permeability coals are less likely to yield commercial gas flows. In my experience with the coal seam gas play here, very high gas saturated coals, like coals in this tenement, should have permeability. This is due to the petroleum liquids conversion to gas during the biogenic gas generation process in the coals, which expands the coal cleats, thereby creating permeability. Having since carried out my own review of the testing that was done, there are certainly inconsistencies in the tests, and I interpret that some reasonable permeability is present, particularly in the northern half of the permit where the coals are shallower. In summary, from my experience, I see all the technical attributes necessary to achieve commercial gas flows and commercial development of Project Venus.
Ron, you've earmarked the commencement of field development by 2021. Can you talk me through the key steps that need to be undertaken in order to hit that deadline?
Well, the first step obviously is to get the permit awarded, which we expect in the coming weeks. Then for this Walloon CSG play, commercial gas flows are the prerequisite for predictable reserve certification. Certifying sufficient reserves will allow us to firm gas sales agreements, thereby making the project bankable and allowing us to develop Project Venus. To prove commercial gas flow rates, we will need to do a successful CSG pilot production tests. To achieve this, our first planned field activity is to re-enter a previously drilled well located immediately adjacent to the cored well. Once we drill out the plugs, we would carry out a new completion method using coil tubing developed by well completion experts Well Pro Services. After we install the necessary downhole and surface facilities, a controlled short-term production tests will be performed on that re-entry. Now, assuming results from that short-term production test are as expected, those results will be used to design a CSG production pilot consisting of 2 to 3 additional production wells, expanding outwards from the test well at our likely future development well spacing. Once these wells are equipped with appropriate downhole and surface equipment along with water handling facilities, a long-term production test of 3 to 6 months duration will be carried out with the primary goal to demonstrate commercial gas flows. Now, this is a catalyst. Early on in the production test, assuming we interpret the criteria that will ultimately lead to demonstrating commercial gas flows, to accelerate 2P reserve certification while flow testing the pilot, we would drill a sufficient number of long offset appraisal wells, probably about 4 or 5 wells as needed to certify enough gas to justify and firm a gas sales agreement and initial field development.
And just finally, Ron, as we approach the end of the 2019 calendar year, what near-term catalysts in Project Venus should investors keep an eye on over the next couple of months?
Well, the first thing, of course, as I mentioned before, is we expect to get the Project Venus permit awarded sometime in the coming weeks, hopefully before the end of the year, but if not, early in 2020. We are also currently finalizing a modest capital raising. The planned use of that capital is to, number one, get an internal prospective gas resource estimate certified by a third-party expert. We have our own internal number, but in order to announce that, we need a third party to verify that. I've already started that process and sent the information to the certifier. It'll be up to him when he delivers that certification. In addition to that, we plan to expand that work to get sufficient conditional reserves to justify a pilot program. The condition to convert these reserves into bankable reserves would be demonstrating commercial gas flows in our pilot program in 2020. Also, we seek and will get approval, hopefully, to re-enter and flow test a well adjacent to the core hole in the tenement. And then the last thing, within the next couple of months, we hope to design and start the approval process to commence our CSG pilot with the goal to prove commercial gas flows.
It sounds like there's plenty of milestones to be keeping an eye on over the next sort of 6 months at least, Ron. So look, we're really grateful for your time today and all the best for the future.
Okay, thanks Alex, and thanks Tim for your time.